everyone. We are in the green room with Jenn Harper, the CEO and founder of Cheekbone Beauty, and I'm so excited to have you here, Jenn. Thank you for joining us.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as I was saying to you when we were doing a quick chat off camera, I first learned about your products when I was having a makeup artist do my makeup for a photo shoot for a book that I was working on. And when I tried your lipsticks, it felt so great on my lips and it wasn't drying. And when I learned about your line, because this makeup artist, such a fan of yours, I became a fan of yours. I love everything that Cheekbone Beauty stands for, and I'm very excited to tell everybody who may not be familiar with your brand a little bit about it and where they can find it. So let's start off with how it all began.
Sure. So definitely not your typical entrance into the beauty industry or the space. I had no experience in this industry prior to Cheekbone Beauty. I was actually selling seafood at the time. I had been in the food industry for
Mhm.
most of my career in broadline distribution in a sales and marketing role. And I was at this pivotal intersection of my life when I began a healing journey. I talk about my sobriety really openly. So I got sober in November of 2014. And then 2 months later, I had this incredible life changing dream. Native little girls with their brown skin and rosy little cheeks were covered in lip gloss. And that's really what I remember most about the dream. And then they're giggling. So they're like joy and laughter. I grabbed my laptop that night and I wrote out. I wanted to make a product, which was lip gloss at the time, and then use a portion of the profits to do something to support my Indigenous community. I didn't know what that looked like. I had written out start a scholarship fund,
Yeah.
create a foundation in honor of my grandmother. And so the reason why that was the thought pattern. When I look back, I was learning about my grandparents' experience in residential school. So my
Mhm.
grandmother was a residential school survivor. I learned this terminology called generational or transgenerational trauma, and that's really what the impact of school has had on First Nations families, so including mine. And so understanding that my grandparents were faced with an event, the residential school system, that obviously no child should ever have to face or be equipped to face, and then they went on and had their own children, and it was ultimately this trauma was passed on to my father, my aunties, my uncles, and then ultimately passed on to me and my siblings. And so understanding that my addiction, alcoholism, was related to that, losing my brother really tragically to suicide in the early days of building the brand, how that was part of this trauma, and then discovering that with armed now with all of this information and this idea about a business, and being really a fan and attracted to brands like Patagonia, Tom Shoes, this idea of like having and building a business that you could do good in the world and do business at the same time, like that was a possibility. I think we've all been led to believe for years that business was maybe bad and it didn't have there wasn't an ethical way of doing it, and then researching and learning more about brands like that. And so all of these situations really became part of who I was transforming into on this healing journey in my own personal life, but then how it's really played a big role in the kind of brand that we're building. And so we say Cheekbone Beauty is now a brand that's really here to redefine beauty for us today and future generations. And we are based on these three pillars: our indigenous roots, my Anishinaabe roots. There's so many incredible teachings that come from our indigenous communities about just solid sets of values and principles, not only to build a business on, but also to make and create products within. So that's our indigenous roots pillar. And then being sustainable by nature. This is something that indigenous communities globally around the world, if you were to make contact with any of them, there is certainly concepts and ideals that are really speaking to how we can protect this gift that is the planet. And
Hmm.
then we are clean color in being bold in that category, of, I think I always called it a sea of like, mint green and white and beiges and browns for so long. But I'm like, nature is just loaded with bold
Right. Very
colors. And
color.
so why
Yeah.
can't we bring that to the clean category? And so that's who we are. And it's taken us this solid 7 years to transform, because the early days we didn't, it wasn't obviously, I think, that recognizable who we are and what we were about. But having no experience in the industry has really led me down that path of what could change. And I just saw that such an opportunity when it came to thinking about sustainability and being sustainably minded and having that become our focus as a brand. Like, how can we truly think about my culture, my people who I come from, and add that into building products that are really better for us and the planet. And proudly, we became a B Corp certified company last April, so we're celebrating 1 year
So
as a B
impressive.
Corp, and just so proud of, I think, all of these transformations. Not only I have made it as a human being, but the brand that we're putting out into the world.
Well, there's so much beauty in your story and how you really reconnecting with your roots spawned this entire business. And I love the name. Now, when I think of Cheekbone Beauty, it makes me just think of, when you put blush on your cheeks, it's really to highlight your smile. So I don't know if that's what you intended with the name, but that's what I associate with it. And it makes me smile to think of somebody who thought so much about how it would feel, how it feels to put makeup on, how it feels to feel beautiful, and that makes you smile. So I'm just curious what the inspiration behind the name was and if I've touched upon it at all.
Yeah, so cheekbones have always been like a favorite feature of mine
Hmm.
on any human, and I do love, obviously, a contoured and a blushed cheekbone. That's, if you've followed any of our socials, that's certainly a look that I'm so
Hmm.
obsessed with. And then I was learning about branding and listening to other entrepreneurs, and I actually was listening to a podcast with the founder of Spank, Sarah Blakely, so another incredibly like powerhouse female founder that I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of. But in this podcast, she was talking about, she was actually a comedian in sort of the early
Okay.
days, and the K sound is something that is really memorable. And so then I became, I was just kept thinking about words with the K sound and what that could be. And driving one day, and cheekbone like flashed before my mind, and I'm like, okay, it has the K sound. That's going to be memorable. And then I just started to think about, oh my goodness, I love cheekbones. And then got home that night and I did the research about cheekbones, and people with higher cheekbones were perceived as more trustworthy. And I
Hmm.
thought, as a new brand, trust is so important for building an audience. And then, of course, Indigenous people, I have very high prominent cheekbones. I know so many people in my family and so many different tribes around the world, are known for having higher cheekbones. And I just thought it was so relatable to the brand I was thinking about building.
I love that. That's such a cool uh, thought to build a name around a sound. And you're right, like the K. I've never thought of it before, but it's kind of like a snap. It's like cheekbone. It just kind of snaps you to attention. So really interesting. I will have to watch that podcast and hear more about that. Super cool. And what I do love about your socials is that every photo has just the brightest colors. It's just, sometimes you see fashion as, different seasons, they're very muted colors or very pastelly or something. But for you, you go for the color punch because, as you say, in nature, it's just so full of vibrancy. And that really makes your social images stand out, I think. And it also, those are colors that I really enjoy. For my skin tone, I know if I ever wore something that was muted in color, then on camera, I will look pale. And my white friends always say, "You can't look pale, Priya, you're brown." And I'm like, "Yes, but you don't understand. Like, the camera will just soak it all away." So I am actually wearing your color today. That was one of your lip stains, and although it was such a favorite product of mine, you reformulated this particular product because it wasn't as good as it could be for the planet. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we started off in the industry like most people do, and they use it's called white label or private label, and you really are just finding a manufacturer that's making products, and they really don't alter formulations and they won't alter packaging. They're really just going to put the same thing that they would put out for everyone else, but put your logo or your branding around that. And so the more I started asking questions to the partner that we were working with, one, they couldn't provide it answers to many things, and they also couldn't provide, you know, documents or credibility on the fact, is this for certain a vegan ingredient, is
Right.
this the source, where in the world did this come from, all of those things. So I really wanted answers. They weren't able to provide them, and then the more research I was doing and learning about specific ingredients, including isodiaking, the ingredient that we removed from the liquid lipstick that you're talking about, I was just learning that it's, it's an ingredient that causes harm to aquatic life. And I'm, as a sustainable brand, we're definitely on this path to do whatever we can to leave less of an impact on the
Right.
planet. Of course, we want to make a big impact in a community and support community, but when it comes to the planet, our goal is like less is more. And so we just had to get really honest with ourselves and think about making decisions differently about the kind of products we're putting into the world. And it was tough because in some cases you learn that ingredient, and like many others, it's long wearing, and these are things
Mhm.
customers are interested in after. But then I think as a consumer, we have to make a decision about, um, is it is it always going to be, I guess, about maybe our personal comforts or wants or needs, or do we have to make sacrifices, maybe not to have the lipstick that's going to last, 12 hours, and 3 hours be good enough, right? And
Mhm.
as opposed to like making a negative impact on the planet. And those are things I think, and when we're defining for ourselves what kind of brand we wanted to be, vegan, sustainable, and clean were those top things that we were after and trying to hit. And we had to make decisions, and then we've also thought about this, that then our customers, we need to make this easy and
Mhm.
transparent for them to decide, what kind of customer do you want to be, what's important to you, and we
Exactly.
could share the work that we're doing with them. Because certain customers, maybe that'll never matter to them. Maybe the long wearing lipstick is something that they're after and they're not concerned about the planet. Well, then first, for sure, that's not a Cheekbone Beauty customer, right? And so
Mhm.
it's just really about defining the kind of customer you want, and then being really open and honest and making sure that your brand is a place of education. If you're going to make these kinds of claims, we certainly believe in, and we've learned this becoming a B Corp, that we have to prove the work that we're doing and explain why, and sort of have the facts and receipts for people.
And for those of people watching who may not be familiar with B Corp status, it really is sort of the ultimate in eco sort of accountability. You have to show, as you're saying, you have to prove that you are being as environmentally friendly, as sustainable in all aspects of your business, the packaging. And that's what I love too. Like, we haven't touched upon that, but even your packaging, even the dyes that you use on your packaging, they're all biodegradable. You are as biodegradable, as compostable, as environmentally friendly as it is possible to be. And so that's another thing that I'm just so honored to be speaking with you about, because this is what we're trying to do in this series of interviews, is just showcase that you really can live a fabulous, fashionable lifestyle in all areas of your life and still be good to the planet and feel good about the brands that you're supporting. And we wanted to showcase all those brands in different aspects. And of course, for so many of us, how we look is a big part of who we feel that we are.
Mm.
And so being able to, put stuff on your face that is good for the planet and is not, being tested on animals in some crazy and horrific experiments, it makes, I don't really know how you can feel good putting stuff on your face to make you look better when you know the processes that that product has gone through. So can you talk a little bit just about how and why you chose to be cruelty free and why that was important as part of your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. As mentioned, I think there's so much also, as I've learned on this journey, misinformation too about what it means to become cruelty-free,
Mm,
animal-friendly, and animal-safe. So for generations, the cosmetics industry has already existed. So in many cases, specifically in North America, we're not reinventing new ingredients that go into cosmetics. So there is technically no animal testing that would have to go on.
right.
I think an industry where this is still relevant would be in the pharmaceutical industry. And
Yeah.
then in specific countries, we know that there is legislation that mandates brands have to do this. And in our space, I think it's insane because these, shea butter has been being used forever. Coconut, like, why are we testing things that have already been tested and tried and true? So
Exactly.
it's a really unnecessary positioning. And so I was really grateful to learn that in North America and in the EU, these things aren't happening in our space as much as I think one would think. And so we're really honest about that journey, what we've learned. And of course, you just said it's unnecessary, it's completely avoidable, like that doesn't have to happen. And so I'm grateful that we've done the legwork to discover it's not happening. The partners that we work with, it hasn't been happening, these things aren't going on. And specifically with the partners that we work with. So and then also some of our raw ingredient suppliers really, they're incredible when you work with reputable, and this is where things are key, is just the reputable organizations that you're working with that can provide you with the documentation that says they are this is an ethical practice, this is happening ethically. And so that is really important, is to understand that the brands that even we work with from a supply chain uh, arena is are doing things on an ethical path as well.
Yeah. And it amazes me constantly that since there exist so many companies in all areas, and we're talking about beauty right now, but there are so many makeup lines that are completely cruelty free. So clearly we see that it can be done, and why
Absolutely.
everybody doesn't choose that path. I mean, understanding that there are some parts of the world, although I thought that I just read recently that China no longer requires animal testing, but I will
I
have
knew
to
it.
verify that.
Yeah, I knew that was I think for a long time that's something that's been coming because there's many big companies. For instance, L'Oreal is a conglomerate and they own, not to name names, but they own multiple brands.
Yeah,
And so from my understanding, which, I'd never call myself an expert in any other brand space, but if they were in that country, then they couldn't make the claim
right.
because they were doing testing, obviously, to be and sell into that country. And so if things have changed, I think it's only going to be for the better because it's a really unnecessary and obviously super cruel thing to happen for no reason at all when we've been using these incredible ingredients for literally generations now, and
Mhm.
there's no need to test them.
Let's talk a little bit about just the fact that I was doing some research on you, of course, and like, your brand has only been around for 7, 8 years, and you have really kind of exploded over the last few years. You're now available in Sephora. You
Yeah.
were featured in InStyle magazine. Congratulations on both of those. Those must have been huge accomplishments for you. How did it feel to see your business kind of take that next step?
Yeah, those are big milestones for a company and a brand and the entrepreneur behind it for sure. And it's so funny now because now, Priya, you get to those spots and then I don't know if this is an entrepreneur thing, but you're like the next thing is
Right.
bigger and harder. And so once you hit the milestone, you celebrate. And I probably don't celebrate long enough, but then you're like just on to
None of us
the
women do.
the
We
the
never
next
celebrate ourselves enough.
I know,
Yeah.
the next thing. So you like forget that that happened, and
Yeah.
you sometimes I do forget. I'm like Sephora, like that is pretty wild. And for us, we're in
Hmm.
Sephora Canada, so the next big feed, we really want to be in Sephora USA, and so we're
Right.
working on that. And we are launching in J.C. Penney and an organization called 13 Loon in the U.S. At the end of this month, which is will be very exciting because it'll be some U.S. presence for us. But we're just trying to grow as a brand and find those customers that
Yeah.
honestly care about planet and people just as much as we do. And really, we know that Cheekbone Beauty has a big task ahead of us. We're in a sort of a mind shift sort of place right now in history and in society, where we need to make a lot of big changes, but that we all know consumer if you look at consumer behavior, that's not an easy thing to change. So it would be
Right.
easy to sort of stay status quo and do what we've always done, but we know everything is broken. And so it's about being part of this new way of thinking, or re-educating, or reevaluating, or rethinking about everything. And hopefully we can build our community and find those people that are on that journey with us.
Now, as I was reading your interview in InStyle magazine, um, there was a statistic you mentioned how the indigenous population in the world, which is represents roughly 5% of the population of the world, I believe it said, is actually responsible for protecting 85% of the world's biodiversity. Now, this is something I struggle with often because I often hear people saying, I can't make a difference. I'm just one person. Or Canada can't make a difference in carbon emissions because we don't contribute so much to it. We're just a minuscule part of the problem. But we all have a responsibility to do our part and to lead by example. So, for you have made this such a pillar of your business to protect the environment and the animals. And, how do you respond if and when people make that kind of comment to you?
So I understand and I know it, but I've actually felt that way myself in the past. So prior to, I think, spending as much time in this space now, I certainly did feel that way, because it does feel like overwhelming and daunting. But I really, like you just said, it's in our little place in the world. If we're doing this, if we're living this way by example, we know that that could have a greater effect. We
Yeah.
just need more of us doing that. And so I think if we focused on the negative side of things, that of course it's going to feel challenging. And also, I think, how do you really show appreciation for something that is a gift, and that's, what it's the life and if I getting to travel to places around the world and just seeing the beauty, I want to show my appreciation for that, certainly. And so that, just trying to make small slight changes, it is possible. And I feel like we just have to, it's a shift in our mindset. But it can be frustrating. I will empathize with the naysayers.
Yeah, well, I can admit to that as well. I remember thinking, oh, bamboo is it's the best kind of material to use for clothing now because it's so easily reproducible. And then I heard that, there are bamboo shortages now because everybody's moving to bamboo. Or and then
But
you
it's
feel
it's
so,
humans. We really, like, the problem is we are the problem, because,
yes.
and this is, we're just actually did a quote in an article that on sustainability. And I think what we love to do is we want everything to be black and white. And
Hmm.
then if we can vilify something,
It's so
that
much
creates
easier.
so much division, and it's so much easier. But
Yeah,
we cannot do that, and we see that happening to plastic right now. One, if we're vilifying it, who's going to make use of all the plastic that already exists, that we've already made a mess of with made we've made the plastic, we've
yeah,
tossed it away, but something needs to be done with it in order so it has a new life or a new purpose.
right.
And so, one, we are a brand that certainly recognizes that, this unfortunate way of human nature is we just want a simple answer, but it's not simple. It is so nuanced. There's no right or wrong technically for so many, or like there's not just one choice for packaging. There's not just one choice for formulations. And it's understanding, I think, all those nuances is really important, and that we have to stop creating ways that we're dividing each other and scaring people, because fear is paralyzing.
It is
So if you hear
paralyzing.
the negative, then you become paralyzed and you don't make any decision,
Yeah,
let
you can almost
alone.
go backwards. It's like if
Exactly.
I can't make any difference, then just screw it. I will just, I don't care.
Right. Exactly. So I think that we need to, like, remove the fear so that we can then decide again, what kind of consumer or customer do I want to be in this world? And if you think, okay, I got my reusable coffee, water, but all like just those little things where
Yeah.
you can decide. And yeah, you're gonna forget it some days, and you're gonna have to if you're in a place and perhaps buy water and not the way you wanted to, but we're human, so we're not like it's not it's also giving ourselves grace, right?
Yeah, you can't be perfect all the time, but as long as you have the best of intentions and you're doing your
Exactly.
part, then just feel good about it and support amazing brands like Cheekbone Beauty. Jenn Harper, thank you so much for
Thank
taking the
you.
time. I am such a big fan of yours and of your work. And for all of you out there, check them out because if you're in Canada, then there's a Sephora near you. Or better yet, just check out their website, cheekbonebeauty. Is it .com?
Correct.
.com. Jenn, have a great day, and I look forward to buying more amazing colors to make myself feel better with, and maybe highlighting my cheekbones, making them
You look
a little
amazing,
higher.
yeah.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.